This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, if you're watching, hello and welcome. This is the September 2020 STL Full Stack talk on Introduction to Linux, going to be presented by Matt Thomas. So thank you, Matt. And with that, we'll turn things over to you, Matt. Matt Thomas, everyone.
Thanks, Brian. For those not familiar with me, my name is Matt Thomas. I'm a developer, full stack senior at Bayer Crop Science. Been around web development for quite a few years, could measure it in decades. Tonight I'm going to walk you through an introduction to Linux. If you want to follow along, you can go to whoami codes, and one of the top presentations will be this intro to Linux. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm not much of a social media butterfly, so you won't get much out of there, but you're more than welcome to follow me or DM me through there as well. So let's move on into this. So why is Linux important? So in 2019, as of 2019, 100% of the world's supercomputers were ran on Linux, and of the top 25 websites in the world, 2 weren't run on Linux. I'll give you a guess who runs those. And 96% of the top 1 million servers run on Linux, 90% of cloud infrastructure, 98% of mobile market, Android and iOS. iOS, we'll talk about whether that's Linux or not. 54% of web professionals or professional developers use Linux, and 83% say that Linux is the platform they prefer to work on. The U.S. Department of Defense has migrated to Linux to increase their security, and U.S. naval warships are run Red Hat. So, and this slide's a little dated at the bottom now, but you could see that Tesla and SpaceX and air traffic control systems are all moving toward and or have migrated to Linux as well, including the space station. So when it comes to distributions, you have quite a few choices. Distributions all run on the same Linux kernel or versions of the same Linux kernel, but they often have different package management systems and different flavors of and levels of security. This states almost 600 exist. I would guess that there's probably more of that, more distributions than that have existed over time. So as you can see, here's our Linux distribution chart as of 2019, I believe. And each one of these lines represents a Linux distribution. And as you can see, there's quite a few of them. And a lot of them stem from Debian. My favorite is Ubuntu. And then there's Slackware has quite a few distributions in there. And this is Red Hat. I don't know why the logo's there. It's probably a copyright situation, but you can see they have quite a few. And then, can't read that, Enoch and Arch. And then all these little extrapolatory distributions of Linux down here. This bottom one here that's kind of mild is Android. So, and what you won't see is iOS is not on this Linux distribution. It's because iOS was actually derived from BSD, which is not considered a Linux distribution because it runs a separate kernel. So, but Debian, Ubuntu, Red Hat, all those are your probably your big 3 distributions, with Ubuntu being actually a Debian variety distribution. So that's kind of your options are pretty broad when it comes to picking a distribution of Linux. A lot of choices. We'll go through like the big hitters. Debian, it's one of the big hitters. It is truly open source. You currently use the Linux kernel or the FreeBSD kernel. I think you've got the option based on the flavor, and it has numerous distributions built on top of it. So Ubuntu is a derivative of Debian, but it's a very popular version. It comes in a significant number of varieties in its own right that can be ran as server client, even on a smartphone, IoT devices, tablets, that kind of thing. Right now, this is what I run on any server I stand up. So that's what we'll be demonstrating in tonight. Although most servers have Bash shell and Vim, so the presentation should be pretty universal. Red Hat, obviously, if you've been in the industry for more than 5 minutes, you'll notice that Red Hat is actually a commercial product. Red Hat Enterprise comes with support, which is one of the few distributions that actually have full support and licensing, which is why a lot of enterprise solution or enterprise companies like Red Hat is because they can get support and they know they're 100% legal because they have licensing. That it comes in variations. Enterprise CentOS, which is an open source version of Red Hat, but is usually pretty laggy on the distributions and the package management that come with it. So you have to do some finagling to get modern packages on CentOS. And then you have Fedora Linux, which is Red Hat's bleeding edge distribution for their enterprise distribution. So what they test bed everything in Fedora, move it to enterprise, and then over time it makes its way into CentOS. Mint, I use this distribution at my last job, and it is based off of Ubuntu and thus Debian. I don't think it's quite as elegant as Ubuntu is. I think the OS itself is it lags behind Ubuntu somewhat. So it's there. It's pretty popular for new users of Linux and people who aren't quite comfortable doing the management of Ubuntu, although I don't find it very difficult to switch between the two. So then there's Raspbian. If you've ever messed with Raspberry Pi or the single board computers, you will have heard of Raspbian. It's a Debian variant designed for the Raspberry Pi, as I said. It's small, it runs off a micro SD card, and it comes with Python and a couple of other things that are pretty specific to the single board computer industry. So neat distribution. And then of course there's Android. I believe everybody's familiar with Android, specifically to run on a mobile device using a touchscreen for smartphones and tablets. Mac OS, again, is it really a Linux distribution? Not really. It has origins in BSD. It's a Unix variant as opposed to a Linux variant. And by default, OS X is Bash or Z shell, so the commands work just like Linux. So it's pretty compatible with everything that we'll be talking about tonight. Questions on those versions of distributions of Linux?
Just, I guess, a question slash thought. I mean, about the enterprise support. I mean, there's got to be vendor support for Ubuntu, right? maybe not as robust and mature as the Red Hat, but I would imagine
Uh,
there's. Oh,
yeah, I'm pretty sure there's somebody that provides support for it, but it's not provided by the actual vendor who
sure,
creates it.
right, right.
So yeah, so okay, um, okay. So graphical desktop environments. Most of your desktop clients, desktop versions of each Linux distribution they'll come with a graphical display environment, and essentially on Windows, it's Windows. It's the UI that you interact with. Whereas like a server will come without it. It'll be headless. It'll come without a graphical desktop environment, and all be command line. But so there's lots of variations and choices in graphical desktop environment as well. There's GNOME or genome, uh, however you want to spell it, just about as controversial as Linux and Linux. So, and then there's KDE or Plasma, and Unity, which I think even Ubuntu has possibly moved away from Unity at this point. But
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
I don't remember if it's moved away in 20 or not. But I'll have to verify that and update my slide if it has. So then there's Cinnamon, which is one of the reasons why I don't really like Linux Mint. So the graphical user interface on Linux Mint is a little bit, I don't know, clunky to me, but it's also lighter than Unity was. So just personal opinion. So, and everybody's got an opinion. So, and then there's XFCE. I've used this. This is totally light. It's very rudimentary, but it will run on a lot of, it'll run on small hardware. So, whereas like Unity and Cinnamon might require a lot more RAM than this XFCE does. So, and then there's always the fallback of using the shell or the terminal. So I believe on Mac this is called, well, I know on Windows they call it command line interface, or if you're on Windows, you probably have Git Bash installed for using version control if you're a developer, which is a version of Bash. So anyway, so there's a few. Here's a little history on the terminal. So there was Bourne Shell a long time ago. And it's the oldest shell, and it was not very feature rich. It didn't have many options, but it was the first one, one of the first ones implemented. Then or Bash shell came around, and it included features, all the features of Bourne shell and a C shell also. And Bash stands for Born Again Shell. It came with command line editors that allow you to use the cursor keys, and a little bit more user friendly. There was also another shell called Corn Shell that was kind of a breed of competitor of Bourne Shell that they integrated some of the features with. So one of the big things for Bash Shell is history and tab completion. And Bash shell is the default shell for most Linux distributions. There's also I guess you want to call it a competing shell called Z shell. It's extended version of Bash, so it's going along the same lines as Bash, but in a different direction. It's based on Bash, but has and some of the same features as Bash, so switching between the two is not overly difficult. There is some feature differences, but Unless you get into the nooks and crannies, you won't notice much of a difference until you really start playing around with some of the advanced features. So we'll go through some commands that are terminal commands. So the first one would be man. Man outputs a help explanation for each command that you put behind it. So if you do man-ls, it's going to output the content shown below, and it's just list directory contents, and then it gives you all the options that are available in each command that you list behind man. So it uses VI navigation and exit commands. So it's often, so you'll notice that a lot of the command line functionality is based around VI functionality. So you'll notice later on that I do a lot of tab completion. I do not like to type, even though I am a developer. So you'll find that I will type a partial command or a partial file name or directory name and hit tab, and it will auto-complete it to the best of its ability. If there are multiple matches, it will not display it initially, but if you type tab tab with the same string, it will list out all the possibilities that will result from that string matching a given search. Sorry about that. So questions on those two before I go on? Okay. Then you get into the basic directory listing commands. So ls allows you to list directories and files. The equivalent of DOS is dir. Star is the wildcard. So if you want to list everything in a folder, you can do ls and then without anything behind it, and it will list everything there. But if you only want to list the JPEGs, you can do ls star.jpg, and it will filter your listing by that wildcard. Listing files and directories in the long format, you would do, and you'll notice that a normal ls, and we'll demonstrate this later, will choose 3 or 4 columns and provide them like in a left to right format in columns. And if you want them just in a long list format, you would do a -L. In Linux, there are hidden files that start with a dot. All you have to do to name it, to hide a file, is to name it with starting with a dot or a period, and then name it, and it will not be visible directly to a person using ls. But all they have to do is do a -A, and they get to see all those files as well. So it's not really hidden. It's just kind of stuck around the corner for convenience. You'll notice that there are a lot of dot files on your Linux OS. So the next one is human readable file sizes. So you'll notice that the first time you do Linux or ls in the terminal, it will list everything in bytes. And when files become rather large, that becomes a computational brain teaser to figure out how big that is. So you can do an -H, and it will display it in 1 meg, 1 gig, whatever, 1K increments, as opposed to, 1024 bytes. And you can also combine them all. So that is one thing that I need to state is that you can combine all your command line arguments into a single one to make them work together. So in this case, you could do an LASH, and that will list all the files in long form and human readable file sizes.
Yeah, that's cool. I've done LA, never LAH. So yeah, that seems
Yeah.
helpful.
And then if you want to make a directory, you type make directory, make dir, mkdir, and it will create a directory for you. Pretty straightforward. Okay, here we start getting into path aliases. So if you want to, we're going to move into change directory next. And that is where you have to start using full paths, relative paths, and you get into um, aliases if necessary as well. So dot is always the current directory, and then double dot is the parent directory. So if you need to go up a directory, you could do cd space dot dot, which we'll talk about here in the next slide. Tilde represents your home directory, and in most cases that's /home/ your username. Excuse me. A dash represents, oh, sorry. Yeah, I did do tilde. Dash represents the previously navigated directory. So if you're bouncing between two directories to do something, so like if you're at home and then you go to, let's say, bar www for some reason messing with Apache and you want to go back home, you can just do cd space dash and you can bounce between those two directories. It'll just go to the last directory that you navigated from. So to reduce the confusion of front slash versus backslash, I call backslashes backslashes, and I call front slashes whack most of the time. It was always something my original mentor come up with. We were communicating across the table, not facing each other's computers, and he's like, "Well, if you want me to do a front slash, just say whack, and it won't be a confusion." So, the front slash or whack is a directory separator in Linux. It is reverse of the Windows backslash. Also, if you use a whack by itself, cd space whack, it will take you to the root directory of the drive you are on. So questions regarding that? I'll put them in context here in the next slide, hopefully. Okay. So if you want to change directories, again, if you could type cd and then the path, relative or absolute path of any directory you want to go to. So relative paths start without a slash and absolute paths start with a slash or a whack. If you want to go up a directory to a parent directory, it's cd dot dot. If you want to go to your home directory, it's cd tilde. Previously directory is that cd dash. If you don't know where you're at, in my console, I always have it output my current directory. But if you don't know where you're at, you can always find your current location by typing pwd. Okay. Touch. If you want to create a new empty file, you can just touch it. So you type touch and then the file name, and it will create an absolute empty file, 0K bytes in size, but it will allow you to create. So like if you're coding in VI and you want to create a new JavaScript file, you would just type touch and then the file name, and it would create an empty file, and then you could VI it. You could also just create it by typing VI in the name of the file, and that will open up an empty file inside of VI, but it will not create it on the hard drive until after you save it. That's the difference. This literally reserves your spot, your file name, prior to having editing the file. So copying, so literally copy source and destination. This is similar to how Windows works with its copy command. The destination default is the current directory and can be omitted. So if you do a copy of a absolute path file and you omit the destination directory, it will copy that absolute path file to the current directory you're in. Wow. And then if you need to copy directories, you can do a recursive and don't have to provide the file names. You only provide the directory names, and it will do a recursive copy all the files um, from one directory to another. Again, the default destination is the current directory or a period, a dot. It is optional. So remove or delete a file is RM, and you type RM and the file name you want to remove, and it will ask you, are you sure? And then move forward based on your response to the question. You cannot RM a folder, a non-empty folder. It will error out unless you use the -R. Then that will remove recursively. It will remove the folder and the files within. If you don't want to be asked if this is really what you want to do, you can type a -F for force, and it will not ask you if that's really what you want to do. So it will be gone from that point on, hitting enter after a -F. You can do, and as I state here, Linux doesn't have a recycle bin. So if you delete something that you maybe wanted to keep, you better have a backup, or it's pretty much just gone. There are ways to recover the file, but they're tedious and typically not worth the trouble. And if you again want to remove recursively and forcibly, you can combine those two and blow away entire portions of the file structure. Again, be warned, because you will not get you will not be asked if you want to continue. It will just disappear. And if you do a recursive without a force, it will ask you if you want to remove every single file one at a time. So,
Hey, Matt, does the order of the flags matter? Could you do -FR, or does it need to be -RF?
most of the time, no.
Okay,
I just have a muscle memory for certain orders, and
sure.
that will come from with time, as well as you guys use the command line more and more. You'll get muscle memory for certain commands. Uh, when I'm in it, a lot of times, or if I'm mentoring somebody, I will have to type it, and then they'll ask me how to do this command, or what command is it I do to do that, and I'll actually have to type it out to and then read it to the person, so that, because I do most of that work with muscle memory,
Mhm.
my brain just knows what I want to do and it types. So yeah, to answer your question, no, the arguments most of the time don't matter. There are certain circumstances where they might matter if they require input. You might have to break them out so that some arguments require values to be fed to them as well. So RM
Sure.
is not one of them. So
All right.
one of the awesome features of Bash is history. Uh, you can type the word history in your command prompt, and it will give you a list of all the commands you've executed. There is a limit that is set by default, and I don't remember what the default limit is. I've pretty much not had any issues running with the default and finding any commands I needed. It will number your recent commands with the most recent command being the highest and the oldest being the lowest. And you can, if you do a history and you find the command you want to run again, you can do an exclamation point with the number next to the command, and it will execute that command again. So if you have a really long command that you are executing multiple times and having to do some other things in the meantime, you can use history with the exclamation point to execute those commands again without having to retype them all. Also built into the bash command and history is you can use the up and down arrow keys to navigate previously executed commands as well. So, and I can demonstrate that for you here in a little while as well. So, questions regarding those few commands? My chat is tiny since I launched this, so I can't quite see it very well.
Yeah, it looks like
So,
people are good.
okay. There's also Control R, which actually opens up a reverse search inside of the terminal, and you could type a string. So it's literally just 3 or 4 different ways of searching previous statements made in the terminal. You type Control R, and you could do an ls, and it will bring up the last iteration of that command, and you could just type enter, and it will execute that command that it brought up. So grep, if you need to do any searching throughout the OS, you will find that grep is a good option. You can search files either in the current directory or recursively with wildcard, or the asterisk being your standard wildcard again for basic patterns, or you can get into regex expressions to filter out certain patterns of file names and directory names that you want to execute or that you want to search for on your OS. Again, regex is a whole nother talk. If you want to learn more about that, there's a link right there. You can get more information on that. So cat allows you to output the contents of a file to the command line. So it allows you, so let's say you have your JavaScript file and you just want to see what's in it without firing up VI or Nano, you can literally type cat and it will output the entire file contents to the terminal right in the window. You can pipe commands together or pass through, also referred to as a pass through. So like if I were to, it'd be silly to do so, but you could do a cat of a file and then pipe it to grep and search that file for a particular string. The reason why it would be silly to do that is because grep can handle that functionality all on its own. But you can chain the functionality of several commands together by using pipes, which is the vertical line symbol referred to as the pipe. So questions on pipe by chance? Okay. There's a command called less, and it does the same thing as cat, except for it uses, so cat will not allow you to paginate through your file. So if you have 1,000-line file and you execute cat, it's just going to literally output the entire file to your terminal, and you'll have to scroll back and forth to find what you're looking for, assuming it stays in your terminal history or your scroll back history. So less uses VI navigation and gives you some search functionality, and you can use spacebar to advance full pages. There's also more, and you will find on older systems or smaller systems that more is actually has less functionality than less does. That's very confusing, but more is found on minimal distributions, and it's smaller in size, 2,000 lines versus 27,000 lines of code to implement more, more instead of less. They both work fine if you're just trying to sort of navigate a file, but if you can and you have access to it, I would recommend using less. So you would cata file and pipe it through less, and it would give you pagination and search. So okay, so chown and chmod is what I call these. Change ownership and change permissions, modification rights maybe. So changing ownership. So each Linux distribution has Linux OSs have the multi-user premise on their OS. So files are owned by a particular owner or a group, owner and group actually. And based on that ownership in the user or the group, permissions are applied. So if you don't belong to, if you aren't the owner or in the owning group, the permissions won't even apply to you unless they're globally open permissions. So, and then, so you use chown to modify who the owner of a file or a directory is, and you use chmod to actually modify the permissions. Read, write, execute are your permissions. That's why you'll see it's an octet down here at the bottom. Permissions is again another whole other talk, but you'll see that 777 is often used. It is full permissions on everything. So that's a wide open file. Anybody on the system can read that file if it has 777. That is because one is given read, write, and execute are given 1, 2, and 4. And if you add them all up together, you get 7. So that's kind of how that works as far as understanding how permissions are set. Again, I will potentially demonstrate this here in a little bit. Top, if you've ever got into Task Manager or I don't even know what system performance applications inside of Windows and Mac, it'll show you how much memory you're using and things like that. What processes are currently consuming the computer's resources. Excuse me. So top will be, again, somewhat hard to read because it doesn't, it lists everything in like kilobytes and the smallest possible unit, and it doesn't do percentages the same way as you could see on the bottom. HTOP is the human readable version of top. Again, it's not available on every system and sometimes needs to be installed, but it gives you a little bit more visual representation and human readable representation of what is going on your computer. As you can see, it's using megabytes in your memory columns down at the bottom called virtual and res. And let's see, that's pretty much it as far as the human readable on the bottom. But the CPU and memory and swap are represented in graph as well as in gigabytes at the top. You'll see that there are just very large numbers, memory and 7-digit numbers as opposed to 6 gig. So, and it gives you in a graph form so that you know if you're exceeding the capacity of your machine. So, and shutdown. If you ever want to shut down a Linux machine from the command line, you use shutdown, and H is for halt and R is for restart. And then you tell it when you want to shut it down. So you can actually schedule a shutdown or a reboot of a system at a future time, as you can see down here on the restart, you can just shut down, reboot at 1 a.m. and this will be dormant until 1 o'clock, and then it will announce that it's going to shut down the system, and then it will reboot the system at 1 o'clock. To cancel such a request, you would just do shutdown-C, and that cancels any pending shutdown requests, or any pending commands that were scheduled using shutdown. If you want to reboot right now, you could just use the word now, and it will shut down and again, -R is reboot, and the time is now, and it will do it immediately as the command is executed. Or if you want to stop the computer, aka power it off, you would type an H for halt. So, here's a bunch of dot files. So if you have, so each of the terminal, bash and Z shell and all of them have dot files that you can store your preferences. There's commands like alias that we can use to alias other file or other commands into shorter key sequences. There are system preferences like setting the prompt, what it would look like. And if you want those to execute each and every time that you log in, you would store those commands in the bash rc or the dot profile for bash and possibly the bash underbar profile file. And then for Z shell, you would do Z shell RC or Z profile, and those preferences would be established every time you log into your shell. So if somebody sees a question come up there in the chat, I can't see, please feel free to verbalize it. Elevating privileges. So most commands or most systems, you will log in as a common user, and you won't have privileges to do certain administrative tasks. So you will need to elevate your privileges to root or to a power user in order to execute certain commands like with Apache or restarting services or modifying certain config files. You will have to elevate your rights in order to modify those files and restart services. To do so, you might type sudo. Some other people might pronounce that slightly different. I was instructed that it stands for super user do. So that's just how I learned to say it, is sudo. And then you type the command. That will put you in elevated privileges for the duration of that command. And then you will be dropped back to your normal user after the execution of that command has been completed. You will also be asked for your password when you execute a sudo, and you also have to belong to a sudoers group or be allocated the permission to run a sudo as a security precaution. By default, most users do not get granted sudo rights, so that is something your system administrator will have to do for you, is to elevate you to the point that you can execute a sudo command. If you find that you ran a command that needs elevated rights and it was the previous command you ran, you can do a sudo space exclamation exclamation, and it will rerun the last command with elevated rights.
That's helpful, because I usually will just retype out the whole thing or tab over or whatever, or just pull it back up and then cursor back to the beginning and type in sudo.
Yeah,
That's nice.
if you need to become an elevated root, essentially, you can type sudo su dash, and it will elevate you to root, and it will keep you in root until you exit. So then you don't have to sudo every command. But again, you have to have sudo rights in order to do this. There might be even a way to restrict you from running this, giving you other sudo rights to commands and not this one. So because once you execute this command, you're now God on the system and you can do anything you like. Could be dangerous. If you ever need to determine who you're logged in as, you can type whoami all as one word and it will let you know who you're logged in as, whether you're yourself, root, or some other user. You can type sudo space another user's name, such as Apache or www.data, which is a couple of users that are used with Apache's web server quite often, to become that person as well and manipulate files for the duration of the session, using that person as your persona. So those are also options. Again, you type who am I to find out who you are currently. If you want to exit the current persona and go back to your previously logged in persona, you just type the word exit and you will leave that current persona and fall back to your default user. If you type exit too many times, there is a potential that you will log yourself out. So be mindful of how many times you type exit. So like if you're sudoing to another user and then to root or something, you could literally be nested 3 deep and exit, exit. And if you type exit one too many times, you can log yourself out. So editors. So any questions on the elevated rights? Okay. Um, editors. We're going to go over Nano and Vim or VI. And so Nano is something that is a text editor that is like competition for VI, if you want to say it's competition, but it was a command line text editor that had like shortcut keys and things like that. It was used originally as part of Pine's email client functionality, so it was more written as a user-facing um, text editor more than a administrator's text editor. So, and here's a screenshot of Nano. Oops. Uh, you could see that it has the commands at the bottom. Control, the caret there is the control key. So caret, control, and letter combinations allow you to execute the commands that are currently listed at the bottom. So, you know, Control G to get help, Control X to exit, Control R to write your file or read a file, and then Control O to output your file or write it. Then there's all kinds of other stuff: copy, paste, select, uh, go to next page, previous page. I'm not a fan of Nano, but I can demonstrate it. Um, so, and I hear that Brian is a fan of Nano, so maybe if I get lost, he can give me some guidance there.
Yeah.
Then there's,
Roll the
then
dice.
there is, yeah, then there is Vim, or often known as VI. So Vim is actually an enhanced version of VI. That's the difference. You'll notice that Vim has a lot more functionality than VI does. So most distributions nowadays just install Vim and alias it to VI. So that's kind of how that works. And in 1991, it celebrated its 29th birthday. So if we do a little bit of math, it's pretty stinking old. So, oh no, it was created in 1991. So Yeah, 29 years this year. So that's a pretty old piece of software for this day and age. So why is Vim important? Vim is found on every Linux computer and is available via the command line. What you will find out is when you, especially when you start managing servers that don't have UIs, you're going to need to edit files at some point in time during the administration of that server. And VI is always available, or Vim is always available to use as an option to edit that file. By default, Nano is not always installed. It doesn't mean that it couldn't be installed, but that's just one extra step that you have to go through in order to administer that file. And if you're working on something like a single board computer, it might be too large to actually install Nano on that computer to edit the file. So Vim versus, or VI versus Vim, I've already kind of touched on this. VI was the original version of the editor and has all the basic features. They pretty much can be interchanged. Vim is ported to a much wider range of OSs. It includes syntax highlighting if you choose to enable that. It integrates C scope, which I believe is a programming language. You can use Vim to edit files across network protocols like SSH and HTTP. It has multiple levels of undo and redo. That's often important. It allows for screen splitting for editing multiple files. It can also edit files inside of compressed archives. So you don't have to extract that massive archive, zip file, or tar file in order to edit that single file. You can edit it in place right inside of that large file. Vim includes a built-in diff tool, and there's tons of plugins and startup scripts files for Vim that allow it to gain a lot of functionality over its default setting. There's also a scripting language called Vim script that allows you to automate the functionality if you so deem to do so. You can also use Python or Perl or shell commands to modify or automate the functionality that you might do in a Vim instance, such as automating, creating files, or updating specific portions of a file. Um, any questions on that? I see a comment, but I can't quite read it.
I was just talking about Vim when Michelle started using it.
Oh, okay. Uh, so to open a file in Vim, you just type Vim and then the file name, or VI in the file name. A lot of times they're aliased, and it will open the file. There are several modes in VI, which often get people confused. There's command mode, which is the default mode. It allows you to enter single letter commands such as go to and search and find and replace. It also allows you to enter other modes. So command mode is your portal to all the other modes. And to get back to command mode, you can just press escape a few times. I always usually hit it about 3 times, and it will pull you out of other command mode you're in. Whatever mode you're in, it will pull you out of it and allow you to enter the command you want to execute. So you can go into insert mode, append mode, and open. Open O will open a new line and put you into insert mode. Append A's will move to the end of a line or a word, and then append from there in insert mode. So that's the difference. And insert mode puts you in, I put you in insert mode where you're at. So you need to be in I, A, or O modes in order to actually type to create content of a file. You could be in an R mode, which is, so these will always push the existing content that is behind or below where you're typing. Replace does exactly like it sounds. It will replace what, it will overwrite any characters instead of pushing them. So modes are important when it comes to VI. So if we have any questions when we get to the demonstration portion, please let me know and we will show examples of those. Basic editing commands. So you could type while you're in command mode, which is all the way out. You could type C and it will change. It will delete whatever you tell it to delete, and it will, it's essentially overwriting, but it'll only overwrite a letter. So if you type C and then a character, it's only going to replace that one letter. And then you can escape and it'll pull you out. So you can do some pretty snazzy functionality by using a combination of commands. So, and I'll demonstrate that here in a second or explain it. Y is yank. It'll yank a character or a number of characters depending on, or movements depending on how you combine it, which we'll talk about next. And then if you do YY, it will not get the character or the movement, it will do the whole line. And X will, I see a typo, X will delete or cut a line. So, so if you do like X, it'll pull that portion of the thing and put it in the buffer and make it available for Y to, or P down below to paste it or put it. D will remove, will also delete it, but it requires a movement. So if you want to do delete the current word, you would do DW, and it would delete the current word. That's why it requires a movement, and I'll explain that in the next section as well. Next slide. If you want to delete a whole line, you just type DD and it'll delete the whole line. Cut it. It will put it in the buffer. So if you do DDY, it will actually reverse two lines. So it'll take the line that was on bottom and put it on top because it deletes it. And then Y will put it above where it was. It's just how it works. It's kind of a neat thing. You need to reverse two lines. DDY is a pretty cool sequence of keys. We've talked about put or paste. If you need to repeat the last command, regardless of what all was done within that command, you could type a period. So if you're needing to replace or change a variable name throughout your code block, you can type CW and change the word, including all the typing of what you did. Then you can put your cursor on the next occurrence of the word you want to change and type P or period, and it will redo the change and all the subsequent typing. So it's a good way to replace like variable names and things like that sporadically throughout the code base if you want to do it without doing a search and replace. If for some reason you need to be very specific. And then of course you've got undo and redo. And again, as the previous slide stated, we do have numerous levels of undo. I've had mixed results with redo. Command structure, so you can do any command, such as here we have D. So if we want to delete the next two words, you would put your cursor on the beginning of the first word and type 2DW, and it's going to delete the word it's currently on and the following word. And it uses spaces and punctuation as delimiters. So that's kind of how it determines what a word is. And like if you just wanted to change the next two words, you would do to CW and it would change those next two words. And it would delete them and drop you into insert mode to where you could insert whatever words you wanted to put in the place of those. So movement, you can use most terminals. You can use your arrow keys. If for some reason there's a binding issue with the terminal, sometimes you have to use H, J, K, and L. It's a little bit wonky, but I've had to use it before because some terminals mess up the binding. Arrow keys work most of the time, which I do prefer. If you want to move to the beginning of a word in command, B will work, W will work for the end, 0 for the beginning of the line, $ for the end of a line, and GG to the first line of the file, and capital G to the last line of the file. All commands are case sensitive. So there is a shortcuts wallpaper that you can use for movements if you need assistance remembering that, located there. Questions regarding this?
Any good ways to remember all this stuff other than a heck of a lot of practice?
There are, if you search for Vim cheat sheets, there's a lot of cheat sheets out there that are labeled to allow you to kind of just hang it on your wall and quick reference it. On occasion, whenever I was learning it, for the most part, and I don't do it a whole lot much anymore. I'm not as much into server maintenance, but as I used to be. But I still fire up Git Bash and stuff. But I used to highlight the ones that I wanted to remember the most, or that I had trouble remembering exactly how to do things. So I would print out the cheat sheet and then highlight the ones that I thought were most important.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Other than that, it is practice. So it becomes muscle memory after a point in time, and you get to the point to where you're using combinations that you didn't really think about, but your brain knows you need to do it, and it knows what character is involved, and it will put them together for you without you even realizing it sometimes. So so visual mode, there's also a so to highlight or select something, you would go into visual mode. So if for some reason it's not really easy to define a movement to grab a portion of the file that you're wanting to modify, you can go into visual mode, which is little v is a character visual mode. It allows you to select consecutive characters or consecutive lines. If you go down, it will, so like if you go start at one point, let's say column 0, and you go over to 20, or you go all the way around, you can go to the next line and capture up to line or column 20 in the next line, and that will be your segment. But if you only want to capture complete lines, you do a control V or a shift V. So it's a shift V, a capital V, and that will select the entire lines without having to do all the wrap. Control V, and I believe that should be a lowercase v instead of an uppercase V, will put you into block mode, and you can select areas vertically as well as horizontally in a square pattern. It allows you to do some pretty funky stuff once you figure out the sequence of how to do those kind of things. And what you do is you you select your characters that you want to do, and then you execute a command on those characters after they're selected. So you would do a V command, one of the three. You would highlight your characters or your lines of code or whatever you're highlighting you want to modify, and then you might do a D to delete all of that. Or there's some funky ways you can do insert and append to modify lines in a very clever way. There's a really, really cool Control V, vertically select the first character of each line, and then do a Shift I. I'll demonstrate this during the demo. And you type the comment out, key character sequence for whatever file you're using. So like in JavaScript, you would use // So you do Control V, Shift I, and then you would type / on the first line and hit escape, and then it goes back and adds that / to every place that had that highlighted in the selection. And again, I will demonstrate that. It's much easier to demonstrate it than it is to explain it. When you're in command mode, if you type a /, it will open up the command bar at the bottom, or it will start typing in the bottom, and you can search your file by just typing a key sequence or a string sequence there. And if it's found, it will move to that first one. And if you need to move to the next or previous occurrence of that string, you can type either N or capital N. And then if you need to do a find and replace, you can also do the search command using a :S, and you can do a search, find and replace, and G means it's global, and it will not ask for confirmation, which is kind of scary as well. So you can always undo it inside of VM or VI, because there is undo and redo, so you can always recover from that potentially, but still it is can be pretty destructive. The exclamation point inside of VI, it has a special meaning. It means do it regardless of the consequences. So when you want to force an action regardless of the consequences, you put an exclamation point after the command. My first mentor, who actually made me use VI for a long time to get used to it, which is the reason why I know everything I know about it now, told me that the exclamation point stood for dang it. You can read what he said there. But so if you want to write and quit, and you don't care if it's going to complain because you don't have something otherwise stated, you do WQ exclamation point, and it won't ask you if you want to suffer the consequences. It'll just do what you've been told. Again, for those who've ever been trapped in VI, you could always do Q exclamation point, and it will let you out. Again, like so if you want to overwrite a file, you could just write :W exclamation point, and you're telling it to write the file, dang it. So that's kind of a neat trick, and that can get you, it can either help you immensely or hurt you immensely. So you can actually overwrite the read-only option if you have the authority to do it. There's ways to mark files as read-only, but then overwrite them if you have the authority to do it. If you have write permissions, you can always override the read-only permission on a file. Here we go. I got ahead of myself. So if you've ever been trapped in Vim, all you really have to do is type Q exclamation point, and it will get you out. You will lose any changes that you made to that file. Sometimes that's good. But it is a way to escape. So I do some mentoring, and once or twice I've been to the point to where I've felt like, okay, you guys want to learn VI, and get them into VI, and then just walk out of the room and leave them stuck in VI and see what they do while I go for a break, because they were being a pain to me. But I was never quite that mean. So thought about it a few times though. Okay, on to the fun stuff. So if you have Git Bash installed, or you're on a Windows or a Linux box, or if you're on a Linux box, you probably know most of what I demonstrated. But if you have Git Bash, or if you're on a Mac, you can open the terminal and you should be able to follow along. So let's see, I'm going to flip over to terminal. And here I am logged into one of my web servers that is running an Ubuntu box. Is this font size good for everybody? Can everybody see this good enough? Oh, now I'm going to have to log back in. So what I did was, I'm sorry.
It works for me. I can see it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good.
So I'm going to use my up arrows here, and you could see that I have some other commands that I've ran. But to reconnect, I'm going to go ahead and type up arrow and get the last SSH command I got. And you'll see that I've logged into my server out on, I use Linode instances. So that's what we're logged into here. And I could type clear, and that will get me to the top. And again, we'll go back to the beginning. So if I wanted to see all the options for LS, I could type man-ls, and it's going to give me all those options. As you could see, I can use my up and down arrows to scroll through here, or I can use space, and that is taking me a page at a time. I can either I can't control C out of here. I can either type Q. I could type Q, which is actually a VI command to get out of there. Let's see. Let's see, pwd, we'll see where, so I'm at home. There's that pwd command. If I wanted to go to var www, so I could do, to demonstrate tab completion, I could do cd space /v, and because there's only one directory in the root directory that starts with a V, it's automatically going to show me the var directory. It's automatically going to type it for me. If I type W, I know for a fact that there's only one directory in there that starts with a W, and it just tab completes for me, okay? If I type an ls here, you're gonna see that I get that column style output going up and down and left to right. So sometimes that's desirable, sometimes it's not. I can do an ls-h or an L, and it's going to get me to me in a vertical fashion. And you could see that my file sizes are in bytes. And if I go to cd-ls-lah, we'll combine them all and give me the human readables. And now you could see that these are in kilobytes. Bytes is still a single thing, but so let's go to, we use the dash to go back to my home directory, and we could do an ls-lah, and we'll see if there's anything bigger in here. Yeah, there's just some Ks. And oh, here's 21 meg, 12 meg. So you could see it's a little bit easier to read the file sizes. Over here, you could see that the permissions are laid out like this. This is user group and other, which is everybody. So this particular file, I have the ability to read and write on it, but not execute it. The group that it belongs to, which happens to be root, the user and the root have read and write, and then everybody has read. So I've copied this file into here or something has created this file from elsewhere. The D at the beginning of this listing indicates a directory. In my console, they are also highlighted in a different color so that I know that they're directories without even having to look at the D over here. You also notice like I have a web directory that's pretty much wide open to myself and the group I belong to. And then others have read and execute on that folder. So any questions regarding that at the moment? Okay. Let's see. We already went over PWD.
Actually, I got a question off the top.
Sure.
Do you remember what configuration you set to get the directories to be in a color?
No, it's just literally the, I'm using Git Bash to terminal
Oh,
into
that,
my,
okay.
yeah, it just depends on the terminal you're using and the Bash configuration, which I did not do anything to change that. So
Okay.
that's something that the Bash shell in this version of Ubuntu is doing. So yes, there are lots of things you can do to change how the Bash shell interacts. That's a whole nother talk.
Sure.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of options. Again, here's that .profile file, and then if I scroll up here, there's the bash rc. Your history is stored in this file, and you can have aliases. I don't know if I have any aliases. If you type alias, yeah, there's some defaults that get created, and obviously I created one. It's funny that this is on here because this is itself. So I would SSH into itself. So apparently I moved this in from some other computer and just copied all the aliases. So, referring to path aliases. So when you do a CD, if you do a dot, it's going to stay right where it is. And you'll notice that my terminal, so this is the user I'm logged in as. My command prompt is set up this way. This is the current user. This is the server it's on. Yes, I named my server Popeye. There's personal reasons for that. If you ever see me at a meetup, you can ask me about it and I'll tell you the story. But other than that, I name them after Popeye characters. So Popeye, Olive Oil, Brutus, whatever. And then tilde is the alias for my home directory. So if I type pwd, you'll see that I'm in my home directory. As soon as I deviate away from my home directory, so like if I go into the web directory, you see it's now appending the current path. And as soon as I go away from my home directory altogether, you'll see that it's showing my current path here in the command prompt. This is something I like to do so that I don't have to continuously do this. Now, this becomes a major problem when you get into things like, long file names, when you get it way deep into, and you'll see that I'm using tab completion. So as you can see now, my command prompt is taking up over half my screen. So there's pluses and minuses to this approach to a command prompt. So you just have to find what you're comfortable with. So.
And so, hey, Matt, when you use the whack, the / I guess, at the
Yes.
beginning, that's that new piece of terminology I picked up. That's like starting it from an absolute path, right? That's going
Correct.
root and okay.
So if I do a cd/, you'll see that put me at the root directory. And and here's that var directory. So I was literally telling it, regardless of where I am, let's see if I can use the dash to get, nope, I went home because
Okay.
that's where I was last. So the dash, so if I type cd/, that's going to take me to wherever. So like if I wanted to go to my home directory and I tried to do that, it's going to say no such file or directory because it actually exists underneath home. So yeah, this is an absolute path. So it allows you to navigate anywhere in the system you want as long as you know the absolute from the root file structure you're at. So sometimes that's challenging, but you will. So like when you start managing a lot of Apache websites, you'll know that var dub is where you put all your files just by standard. Just that's because that's where Apache wants to look at everything. So you'll start knowing absolute paths just based on your experiences, and you'll be then you'll be able to manage going back and forth between those a little easier using absolute paths instead of having to go cd / okay, what was that? Oh, it was var. Oh, and now what was that? And now
Right.
it's dub. So, and sometimes you got to do it that way, but when you're unfamiliar with the file structure, but when you know the absolute path, that is definitely easier than trying to navigate the way I just demonstrated. And by the way, I am using a programmer's font, so you'll see that it is doing some funky things to my characters. If I highlight on them, it will show them in the correct perspective. So don't get confused by my font. The font I chose has ligatures enabled, which, like if I were to type a fat arrow, well, it's not going to do it for that, so never mind. Anyway, it puts multiple characters together in a single symbol when it knows the right thing to do. So again, back to the aliases. So if I wanted to, for some reason, copy a file from the current directory, whatever, to another directory, so this would take the file, file name. And this pattern here would move it or copy it from the current directory and copy it to the parent directory based on dot being the current directory and dot being its parent. So because I omitted the file name, it would just name the file in the parent directory the same as the file being copied. I would also have the option to change the name of the file at the time of copying it. Questions regarding that kind of thing. So that's current directory and home directory. I've used the dash a couple of times. I've used the tilde a couple of times. That kind of thing. I'm actually going to use the tilde because the next thing I'm going to do is going to be adding a new file. So if I wanted to create a new file, I could do demo, full stack .text, and that will touch that file, and then I can ls that demo file. And it created a file. Oh, let's do a ls-la, and you could see, or just L, and you could see that it's literally 0 bytes. So literally it's an empty file. It's just literally a placeholder on the disk, taking up 0 bytes. So that's how you create a file. If I wanted to, again, if I wanted to copy a file, I could do demo.txt, copy it, and I could copy it to demo2.txt. And now you could see that there is now demo and demo2. So that's just how you copy it. If I wanted to copy it into a different directory like web, I could just provide the path. So demo.txt. And then if I wanted to copy that into web, I could just tell it like that. And if I go into web now, I should have demo.txt, which is right there. So that's just essentially how that works. Here is a caveat. Let me see if I'm correct in this before I make the statement. If I don't push that slash on the end there, you're going to see that it actually, well, no, because there was a, oh, did it? See, you got unexpected results now because there was a folder named web, and So if I do cb demo.txt, yeah, well, it kind of gives you a fluky or an inconsistent or unpredictable result. I'm sure there's a predictable solution to it, but I don't recommend, if you're copying to a directory, use a whack somewhere to identify that it's a directory. It'll be a much more predictable outcome. So, and if you wanted to do copy a directory, you would do cp. So like, let's make a directory. I'm going to jump around here a little bit in my demo, but let's make up a directory called test, and then we'll touch a file called in the test directory, and we're going to call it test dot or um, um, sample.txt. So now I should, if I ls text, I should have sample.txt inside of it. If I want to copy test recursively, in other words, I'm going to get the everything inside of it, I can do test, and then we'll call it test2, just because I'm not very creative tonight. And you'll see that we now have test2. And if I ls test2, you'll see that it has sample.txt in it as well. So you literally copy the entire folder and any structure underneath it. So if your directory is 5 gig in size and you do that copy, you're literally going to take up double the amount of space. So be careful of that. So any questions so far? I know I'm kind of scooting along here. So if there's any questions, please feel free to stop me and let me know.
And so, yeah, I know when I was first learning this stuff, copy was pretty intuitive because of CP. But when I went to like rename stuff, I was expecting
Yeah,
RN, and that just, but it's MV, right? That's for move.
yeah,
Or
it's move. Yeah. So if you, and that's one, I guess I need to add that to my demo or in my slide deck. MV is move. So yeah, if I wanted to, let's say move test to test 3. Yeah, it's literally move. So now you can see that test 3 exists instead of test. So yeah, I actually forgot about that. So I'll have to add that to my slide deck. So yeah, move is the same as rename, or if you want to move a folder from, so like in Windows or Mac, you would just drag the folder to another location or another window and it would move it. Yeah, MV is move, and that allows you to rename or relocate files and directories. So, and as you can see, it didn't require recursive when it was a folder as well. So I'm pretty sure there are command line options. Recursive doesn't appear to be one of them. So it's able to treat directories and files in a consistent manner. So yeah, it's a good addition, Brian. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, no problem.
So I can remove or delete files by doing RM, and you'll see that it didn't even ask me if I wanted to truly to remove that. So on a single file, force is not necessarily required. But if I were to RM dash R, if I can type, and then I type test2. Oh, isn't that special? I'm wondering if I have an alias set up for RM that has nope, no aliases. Okay, that's interesting.
Do you have
So,
something that bash RC file or something maybe set up?
well, that's what I was saying is it would be an alias.
Oh, that's all in there.
Yeah, that would be adding the dash F by default, but still you kind of get the point that removing it on a Linux system is dangerous. So don't. But if I do test 3, it's going to say it can't remove it because it is a directory. So it does require me to do the -R to get rid of a directory. So it's just not asking me. I might have set a configuration or something inside of that always told it to tell it yes. So it may be asking, but confirming that it's saying yes by default. I believe that's an option that I may have set up. So up next is history. Oops. Let's see. I lost my script. Okay. So up next is history. You can see here all the commands. And as you can see, there's no lack, especially on the default systems, of the number of commands that can be saved and searched through well into the 2000s here. So if I wanted to rerun 2071, which is just an LS, not really worth typing history to get an LS, but just to demonstrate the purpose there, you kind of get what I'm doing. Let's see. You can also do up and down arrows. So as you can see, I'm going through the history one line at a time just by doing the up arrow, and you can do a down arrow. If you get into a certain situation and you want to back out, you can always type Control C, and it will essentially back you out of the current situation you're in and get you a new command line prompt. Sometimes that's the best way to escape, a precarious situation you're in. So let's see, Control R. If I type Control R, that's going to open up the reverse search for that. And I can type, test. So the last command I typed that had the word test in it is right there. And if I were to hit enter, it would re-execute that. Of course, it's going to fail because I've already removed it. The next thing we can show is the grep. So I'm going to grep this log file, let's encrypt log, and I'm going to use tab completion there. I type let's and hit tab, and it auto completed because it was the only file in my home directory that matched that beginning string sequence. So, and as if I hit enter, you're going to see that it went through each one of those. It went through that file and found every place that the word file was used and outputted that line. So questions on that, because that's sometimes a little tricky for people to understand. It literally just searches for that string through the file. Oh, okay. So another way to do it, which I'm not sure necessarily why you would ever do it this way, but it's just a way to demonstrate a pipe. So you can do the same grep by catting out the let's encrypt log and then piping it through grep and just looking for the word file. So you can also cat let's encrypt and then type less, and now we're looking at that file. That's the entire contents of that file. So, and then I could type Q to get out. So one of the things that you might do is if we grep, so if we were looking for two strings, and there's ways to do this with grep too, so don't act like this is the only way to do it, but let's see. So this is going to cat the whole entire file. It's going to grep out lines that have file in it, and then that's going to pass the filtered result from this into the next, and we could do grep again, and we could see if there is something unique. So we could do handlers, And now we only got the two files, or the two lines that had both file and handlers in it. So that might be a good example for doing a piped grep instead of just a standard grep on a file, is to kind of make sure that both of those criteria are matched. So let's see. So we can do, I'm going to do an ls-la, and that's going to output this, and we want to find the let's encrypt file, should be right here. And you'll see that it's owned by root. Let's see. So I'm going to try to chown this, and we're going to try to chown this to mat instead of root, and we'll probably fail. I'm not probably, we're going to fail because I don't have the rights to modify root files up by default. But I'm going to jump ahead in my file here, and well, actually I'm not. So I can do sudo --, and it's going to re-execute the same thing. It's going to ask me for my password. And if I can remember my password, that's unfortunate. Maybe I mistyped it. Yeah, I mistyped it. So now as I can do an ls-la again, and you'll see that this less encrypt is now owned by mat instead of root. Again, that's the user and the group. Every user ends up typically getting a group named after them as well. It's just how most Linux distributions are how they work when you create a user. Okay, so there's also a file in here called MySQL history. And you'll see that it is read and write only by me, but maybe I want to make this a little bit more open so I could do a chmod, and I own it, so it's not really a permit or ownership issue. It's just a permission issue. So I can do chmod 777, which is all permissions, and I can do /my and tab to use that tab completion. Don't ever type at the command line any more than you need to. Always tab when you think you got enough characters, and you'll see now that that file now has not all permissions. That's interesting. Did it error? Oh no, I didn't do the LA. I'm looking at the old one. So now you'll see that it has all permissions. And again, this Linux distribution knows that that is bad, or most likely something unique that you should be called attention to. So it does highlight it in a specific way, color-wise, to let you know that that's probably not a good thing. Wide open files are typically unwise unless there's a very specific reason you need to have it that way. So I'm just going to clear just to kind of get things to the top again. And then, oh, we're going to try top. So here's top. This is the machine that's running on here, and you could see the processes I have. You could see the memory, and then the current memory and usage, and the total memory. Oh, that's the free memory. This is the used memory, and then it's got a buffer cache, and then you got swap all the values for it. You can see that SSHD, which is how I'm logged in, is bouncing around at the top, along with MySQL, which is the database server I have running on this, and a bunch of other things that are just kind of bouncing around as they use processor power. You'll see that they're using a percentage of the memory and CPU as they bounce around. This is actually the command I'm running right now, top, that every once in a while it polls and it uses CPU and memory. There's my SQL again popping in there. So I'm going to go ahead and quit this by typing Q. Again, VI is a very integral part of Linux commands. So as you could see, that was kind of rudimentary and crude to look at versus this is HTOP. And you could see that it's much more graphical in representation, and it understands. It's a little bit more easy to read and more effective to possibly discern any issues that you're having. I always find it fascinating to look at the uptime on servers, Linux boxes. This one's been up well over a year and approaching 2 years without ever being rebooted. So that is actually a pretty minimal representation of a Linux box. I've seen Linux boxes that have ran for 10 years straight. Not really a good thing to brag about because that means you probably haven't updated it and rebooted it in a while. But the longevity of a Linux box and its OS are pretty strong. You can run them for a long time. So, and again, I should be able to. I could type Q there. There was also some shortcut keys at the bottom of the screen that you could use to get out of HTOP. I could do a shutdown restart, but then that would remove my my wonderful statistic of almost 2 years of running, so I won't demonstrate it, but that is how you would reboot it, or you would run the H option to halt it, which would stop it dead in the water, and then I would have all kinds of trouble restarting it because I got to go into my web interface. So again, this server is running in the cloud, so that's why I don't really want to reboot them. So that is the shutdown commands. Any questions so far?
No, thanks for the HTOP. I've not seen that one.
Okay. So any other, I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No, just
Okay. So on to elevating rights. So if I type who am I, and again, I cheat because I run my user in my command prompt. So I kind of always know who I am just for security purposes. But if I were to sudo su dash, this is going to elevate me to root. And you'll see that my command prompt changed. But if I type who am I, not all systems come with this command prompt, so it's not always as obvious. But now I can do any command I want on this server without the server even asking me, "Are you sure?" Most of the time. Very dangerous to be in a elevated privilege and not know what you're doing. You should never truly just log in as root. You should always log in as a standard user and elevate rights for as small a period of time as you need to do the job at hand and then get out. And you shouldn't run services as root unless it's absolutely necessary because that's a security vulnerability. There's lots of reasons why you wouldn't want to be running as root. Now, the funny thing about it is that you would think notice that it shows me as I'm in the home directory of root. You would think that would be /home/root, but if I type pwd, you'll find that root has a special home at /root. So there'll always be some kind of weird things lying around in here that only the root user gets to see because of his permissions. So again, to get out of root, you just type exit and it will log you out of the current user you are and bring you back up one level to whatever user you previously were. That brings me to Nano. So I can do Nano Any questions regarding elevated rights before I move on to the editors? Okay.
Is there a way to tell what rights you have without the user ID is obviously that way? Is there any other ways?
To determine what rights you have to execute something?
Yeah, like permissions in a folder.
Yeah, the ls-la will tell you. So you would look at the owner and group, and if it's somebody so like if you belong to a given group, that group will give you the permissions in the second octet of strings. If it's owned by yourself, then you get the first octet. And if it's neither, then you get whatever permissions are in this last octet of our permission sets. So like
Okay.
most anybody on this server could come into my into my directory and read the files that are in my home directory, but they couldn't execute or write them or change them.
Makes sense. Cool.
Okay. I appreciate the questions. So let's do a nano on demo.txt. Do I even have demo.txt left? I do not, so let's do demo 2.
Can you cut and paste in both VI and Nano? I assume you can, but
Are you
just
talking about with your mouse?
you with what you get a string of text like you did a grep on a file out there. I want to cut and paste that into a area in a VI. Is it possible to do that with the commands there?
So the commands within the file. So here, let's do this. So, and Brian will have to keep me honest about Nano because I'm going to go off the script here a little bit. But so it's always in insert mode, so you can type whatever you want, and to get into other things and do other things, you have to do commands. Brian, how do you highlight in Nano? Do you know?
I don't really highlight usually. And honestly, I've shied away from Nano. Like I use VS Code and I push up via WinSCP. So I'm
Yeah,
not.
so yeah, like Control K is supposed to copy, but I don't know. Oh, well, okay, it cut the whole line. So in theory, I should be able to do a Control U, which is uncut text, and it pasted it. Okay. So yeah,
So what
it's
did you
just
do?
I did, and see, I'm having trouble seeing where my cursor is. So I'm assuming I'm on the top line, and I do a Control K, which is cut text. So it's taking the whole line, and then I'm going down to the bottom line, and I'm doing a Control U, and it's pasting the entire line.
Okay.
So that's copy and paste inside the actual editor. What I believe was being asked is like, can you copy and paste from the terminal and then put it in the file? I
Yeah,
would,
you just right click, right?
yeah, but you're dependent on the OS you're doing that with. Uh, so like if I
Maybe.
were to copy and paste here, so like let's see, let's Control X to get me out of here. It says, do I want to write? Save the buffer. In other words, do I want to save the file?
Maybe.
We'll say
Yeah.
yes. And what format do we want to do? This is another reason why I don't like
Yes. Three-step
Nano.
process to get out of there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like massive. So I want to save it as that name. So now I could cat demo, and we could see demo 2, and we could see that it actually has that stuff in it. What I believe was being asked is if I could copy this from the terminal
Yep.
like this. Now the thing is I'm reliant on, because I'm running on a Windows box, I'm using the Windows buffer here. And I'm using the terminal software that I use to access my terminal in order to do this copy and paste. It's not necessarily within the OS. So in theory, I should be able to paste, and it pasted a blank line because that's what I highlighted here. That's just how my terminal software is acting.
Okay.
So if I copy here and paste there, because that's where my cursor was, it put it in there. But that's all reliant on the OS that I'm currently running because I'm going between two applications. The the terminal itself doesn't have a buffer that allows you to copy and paste between different applications. VI has a way of split screening that you would open one file and you would go over and yank it, and you would go to the other file in the same window and you would put it, and then you're staying within the VI buffer. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, so it sounds like the same capability, cut and paste is available on VI. It's a question
Yeah.
of you have to buffer first and
Yep.
then paste it. Okay.
But you have to have both files open in the context of VI, or you're dependent on the OS's copy paste buffer to move that text back and forth. So just depends on how you want to do it. Yes, it's possible, but it's not quite as straightforward as you would think it would be. So
Yeah, like with Notepad, you're used to using that. Even
Yeah.
Linux, so you just basically go there, you right click, paste, away you go.
yeah, but even Notepad doesn't actually have a copy paste buffer. It's actually Windows that has that copy paste buffer that you're using to migrate back and forth inside of Notepad. So
I just want to make sure I'm on the same page. So with Nano, you copy something from the terminal, from say Notepad, you open up your Nano file, make sure your cursor is at the right line. If you just right click, that will paste in Nano.
yeah, but what you'll see is right here, this is the actual Windows copy paste context menu. It's not
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, right.
it's not the terminals or the Linux commands copy paste
Got you.
functionality.
Got you.
That functionality is only available within the text that's within the file and via the commands that are within the software. And you can only manage the text within it via these. So does that make sense? Or did I make it muddy?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can. Yeah, it's not.
So,
You're not relying just strictly on Nano for, like you said, the buffer or whatever. You're
right,
on Notepad or I guess the Windows OS for the buffer for the payload that you're actually pasting in there.
right. Nano has a buffer, but it's only good for the text that's in the actual file.
Right here, right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you wanted to copy a line from line 3 to line 9, then you could do it within the context of Nano. But if you're trying to copy it from outside of Nano into Nano, yeah, you're relying on your OS's copy paste functionality to do that. So, and when I get over into VI, I can demonstrate that you have to be in insert mode or a pin mode to actually be able to paste. So you have to prepare VIM or VI to accept the pasted text. Otherwise, it doesn't do anything. So
Now with VI, it would work the same way if you didn't have split screens up, right?
correct. It would work the same way, except for you have to tell it you're about ready to insert text via paste.
Sure.
So yeah. So I can do VI or Vim. I've got a copy of the presentation that I created that you're actually looking at, an old copy. And so this is Vim. And all I did was type VI or Vim in the file name I wanted to open, and it opened up the file and ready to open. As you can see, it acknowledged the fact that it opened this file. It has 796 lines in it, and it has 41,000 characters in it, almost 42,000 characters in it. The cursor is at currently line 1, position 1, so it's right up here. Not the exclamation point, it's right there. And then it says it's currently at the top. So as I can move down. Those numbers will change for line and cursor position, and the percentage of the file you're down now is displayed. So you can kind of get an idea of how far down the file you are without a scroll bar, because it's listed right there. So the different modes. So right now I'm in command mode, and if I were to type a colon, you would see that the bottom line here, it opened up to type a command. There are all kinds of commands you can. So let's do show number. No, it's set number. Sorry, set number. Now I'm really getting whacked out. So let me do U. That'll do an undo. So I should be able to do escape a couple of times. Set. Oh, I was putting my JavaScript daily muscle memory had me putting a semicolon on the end of that, I believe. So it wasn't looking at semicolon because it didn't understand what I was looking for, because VI doesn't like that. So anyway, set number is a command that you can execute inside of VI. And as you can see, it turned on those line numbers, and I can now see that cursor a little bit easier. So there's insert mode. So if I wanted to insert a line or characters here, I could type I, and it tells me now that I'm in insert mode. And I can now input characters. And obviously, as you could tell, I have syntax highlighting turned on for HTML. I don't believe I did anything on this particular computer to enable that. That's just the functionality that came installed with this distribution, which I'm pleased that it did. But I can type anything, I can delete anything I want. I can damage the file in any way, shape, or form I would like until I escape. Oh, I hit the wrong button. Now I'm really in it deep. Okay. So I can, as long as I'm in insert mode, I can do any damage I please. And then I hit escape, and now no matter, well, I typed I by accident, so never mind. But as long as I don't type I again as a valid command, I can move around, I can do whatever I want, and it won't modify the file in any way, shape, or form unless I execute a command that does allow for insert. So if I were to type A, it would move it to the, it would append it to the next character. If I type capital A, it's going to move the cursor to the end of the line here and allow me to append a string. So that's the difference between A and capital A. A will, so the cursor now is in front of the P. If I were to type A, it's going to move it to after the P, and it's going to then append. So that's appending to the existing character. So if I wanted to insert a new line, I could type O for open, and it's going to open a new line and put me in insert mode so I can type here. If I were to type Shift O, it's going to open up a line above where I am and put me into insert mode. Questions on the, go
Can
ahead.
you explain A again?
A again? So it's going to append the current location and put you in insert mode. So A, lowercase a is just going to move me to the end of the next movement, which is a character is the smallest movement. So so here I'm on P, right before the P. If I type A, it's going to move me to the end of that P and allow me to type.
Right.
It's kind of not overly useful, okay?
That was lowercase a.
Yeah, that was lowercase a.
Okay.
Now so I'm right in front of the P, and if I type uppercase A, it's going to move me to the end of the word, or the end of the line, I'm sorry.
Okay, all right.
Which is really the useful part, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time. So, and let's see if you can use key sequences. I don't think it's going to movements. No, So like you might do I was trying an AW to see if it would append a word, but as soon as I type A, it moves and opens up insert, so the W gets typed instead of the
Sure.
moving it to the word. So not really. I don't use A much. I use Shift A or capital A. So and then so Shift R puts you in replace mode. So now everything I type is overwriting everything. So instead of pushing it, it won't. Versus insert, if I were to do an insert, kind of self-explanatory, it's going to push. So that's really the 3 or 4 primary modes for VI. You can, I'm going to go ahead and put in a couple of spaces here so that I can demonstrate movements. So, so to do like a command combination, you might do, so if you wanted to delete the next 2 words, so I might do 2DW, and it deleted the previous 2 words, or the next 2 words that the cursor was on. So did everybody kind of catch that? So
Yeah, it was a bit of a lag, but yeah, I saw that.
yeah, so if I type 2DW, it's going to say this is one word. Oh, there's a space. This is another word. I'm going to delete the 2 next words. And again, I can demonstrate that as 2DW. And it removed those 2 words. So the odd thing about it is D has, well, I think it's X. So let's undo this. So if I do 2XW, I don't know what that did. It just removed 2 characters. So yeah, it's a little funky that you got to get your words and your commands, your movement commands and your commands, what each one does independently, because VI comes with a lot of key combinations that you can use when you understand the nuances. You can do some pretty powerful things. So like if I wanted to replace the 2 next words, I would do 2CW, and that's going to remove those 2 words and put me in insert mode where I was at with the first word that I started. So that allows me to replace 2 words. And then if I wanted to copy this, I could do YYP. If I wanted to, and let me see, I'm going to do a DW here to remove 1 word and make it unique. If I do DDP, it will actually reverse them because I deleted the line and paste puts it underneath all the time. So DDP actually will reverse 2 lines because I deleted it and then pasted it under. So it's just kind of a easy 3 key sequences. So questions regarding that? I know I'm kind of moving a little bit quick
Well,
here.
there's a lot to it though, too,
Yeah,
right?
there is. So and so if I wanted to, I think I sort of demonstrated this. If I wanted to change something, I could change this word and then type it, and it would remove the whole word and then allow me to retype. C always requires, or change or replace always requires a movement. So if I wanted to do 3C, oh wow, C, I don't even know what that did. So, so it looked like it removed 3 lines. So getting to know your movement commands is important when you're going to start doing a lot of this on the fly editing. And I am a little rusty, but so like
But to undo, what is it?
it's you.
Just you, no shift.
Yep, just you. Well, bring you back through everything you've done.
Yeah, so that's nice.
So, yeah. And then you can do Y, which will yank a character. And then if you do P, or you could do YY and it'll yank a character, a whole line. Again, Y, I believe you have to use a movement. So if I do YW and then P, it's going to copy the word and then paste it. So, because I had my cursor after the thing there, so if I do YW and then paste it, it's acting funky. So it's just getting that 1A, I believe.
So when you say YW and then paste it, so you're typing in the letter Y and W, and then what else are you doing?
P.
Okay, P. All
For,
right.
for put, yeah.
YWP. All right.
Yeah. And then you could do X and it'll delete one character at a time. If you want to delete the next 4 characters, you can do 4X and that'll delete the next 4 characters. If you want to delete the word, you do DW.
And you're just typing. It's not showing these commands up on the screen.
Nope. Unfortunately not. That's why I'm trying to be as verbal as I possibly
Yeah,
can.
that's cool.
Yeah, and then I showed you, huh?
No, just it'd be kind of helpful. So when you got into this, you did like a colon or something, and it looked like a line opened up at the bottom. I don't know what
Yeah,
that put you in, but it'd be nice if it just kind of kept that and just you could at least see the commands that you're typing.
yeah, yeah. That'd be a good suggestion for the next time I present this, if I could
Oh
find
no,
one.
not from you. I mean, from
Uh,
a BIM point of view.
yeah, they're pretty hardcore when it comes to Vim. So
And that's what, yeah, right. I'm beginner's child's eyes here. So
yeah, no, it's all good, man. So DD of course allows you to delete a line, and you can do 2DD, and it'll get the next 2 lines, and you can continue to do that until whatever. And again, if I do a period, so DD was the last command I executed. If I do a period, it's just going to re-execute that DD.
yeah.
So, uh, and then undo obviously undid what I just did. So that kind of thing. And then so visual mode. So let's talk about visual mode. So if I do a V and command, you'll see that it does put you in visual mode. And this is going to be character visual mode. So as I go over, you can see that it's doing each character at a time. And if I go down, it's just going to go to the end of the existing line and come back to the cursor position I was on the previous line. So this is kind of like how Notepad works by default. Okay. And once you have something like this um, highlighted, you can execute a command on it like yank. And then if you wanted to paste that, you would paste that in. And now it commented all the way down, even to the half line that I copied or had highlighted. So that's kind of like your square, your standard character select you have even in Notepad and other standard selection processes in most apps in general. But if I do Shift V, it's going to highlight lines. So now if I yanked it and then pasted it down here, I'm getting a full consecutive set of lines. I'm not getting any cutoff. So that kind of thing. The power of visual mode is pretty awesome because what I can do is I can do something funky like this. Control V puts me in block mode. And as I go down like this, because I'm on so you'll see that the selection now goes from this D up to this V. And if I do a Shift I, which puts me in insert mode, inside the visual mode that I was already in, and I type a // which happens to be the comment line for this JavaScript portion of the file, right? So you could see I've commented out that one line, but I'm inside the visual block mode that I established. So as soon as I hit escape to exit insert mode, it's going to apply that same change that I made to that first line to all subsequent lines. So it becomes very easy to to comment out blocks of code or to change portions of a file pretty effectively and quickly.
Yeah, that's pretty nice.
It's not intuitive per se. You kind of have to figure out how VI works, and I think this is where the learning curve kind of hockey sticks a little bit, gets a little steep to be able to do some power moves like that. So that's the visual modes. Any questions regarding them? I think the first two are pretty straightforward. That block mode can be interesting. So now
Yeah,
if I wanted to, I'm sorry.
looks neat. I appreciate that.
Yeah, just to demonstrate getting rid of these comments in the same fashion, you would do Control V to get in that block mode, and you would make sure that you're not getting anything else, and you would just type X, and it would delete those two slashes in that space and pull your block of code back to the appropriate indentation. Again, using that same methodology, you can get rid of your comments pretty effectively and quickly. A lot better than some editors have the ability to do even in today. So as far as searching goes, I could type a / down here and I could type link, and it's going to move my cursor to line 18. Well, I just tapped enter to move it to the next one. I'm typing in and shift N to move around from previous next and previous instances of those that string. So I can also, one of the things I can do is I can type slash or three. I think that's a mistake there, so I'm not going to demonstrate that. But you can also do a find and replace. So you can do :S/. This is substitute. So let's try a link, and then let's replace it with I don't know, something odd, golf. G. And now everywhere where I started, the link has got replaced with golf. So if I go up to here and I type dot, it should, oh, wow. I don't know what it just did.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, I thought it was going to redo the search, but it didn't do it. So, so if I type link, so my cursor is at line 18 now, and I type golf globally. Oh, well, that's interesting. Wonder why it's doing that. Oh, I do know, because if you don't do this, the %, so the % says take the entire file into the search, and then the G just says don't ask me for every occurrence. So now if I do link with golf, G, it's not going to ask, and it's going to replace everywhere that said link. Even up here, this is why you wouldn't necessarily want to do this, because that word link there was used in the HTML. This was linked down here used as a variable name. So now I've botched all my HTML.
Yeah.
Because
there's no way to say, hey, do all of them from this point on.
I think you might be able to do a visual. You might be able to select it and then do the search on it. We can try that. let's try that. So we're going to do a Shift V, and we're going to highlight this. And then I'm going to try a colon %S / link / golf / G, and it didn't like whatever I did. So yeah, see, there's little nuances that I'm sure that's possible.
Sure.
I'm a little out of date with my BI skills per se, for some of the more sophisticated operations like that. So,
No, yeah, you know a fair amount, man.
well, this is why I would do something. I would do it like piecemeal. So, and then if I wanted to get out of here without modifying this file, I would do :Q and then that dang it, and it would execute. It would allow me to get out of here without asking me if I wanted to write it. So then I could go back in, and if I wanted to make a change, let's say we're going to do that set number, and so I can see where I'm at, and I wanted to remove this comment. You know, if I wanted to remove the comments for some reason, I can do a W, and it's going to say that it's now written, and now I can do a quit, and it'll let me out. If I did the same thing again, so let's say I wanted to remove something like this, and then I do a quit without writing, it's going to ask me if I want to. I haven't written this file, so it's going to object, but if I wanted to quit without writing, I could do that exclamation point, and it would quit without asking me to write the file first. Any questions so far? I believe that's the end of my demo, so I'm going to flip back to my slide deck here, and let's see. I'll open it up for questions. Any questions from anywhere in the conversation?
That's a great intro. I appreciate taking a cut 2.5 hours running through this. It was an incredible time frame.
Yeah, I didn't realize I'd been going that long. I apologize if it's.
No, don't apologize. You're taking your time and showing us, so that's very much appreciated.
So,
Yeah, no, you definitely packed a punch, man. Appreciate it.
All right. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at MatsyNet or my personal website, portfolio website, where's MatsyNet codes. If you want to see the presentation slides, they are stored there on my website and under the Intro to Linux, which you can find on the front page, and share the slides with anybody else that might be interested. And that's all I have.
Yeah, but man, yeah, thank you again for presenting. Yeah, this was super informative. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Appreciate putting this together, and I know it takes a lot of time to put this together, so much appreciated.
Cool.
All right, well, yeah, we'll wind this down then. So yeah, if you're watching, thank you for watching. Hopefully you found it as informative as Tim and I did, and Michelle. And yeah, we'll be back hopefully in a couple of weeks for JSTL. We're still working on a speaker there, but if not, we'll do this again in 4 weeks, second Wednesday of October, whatever date that is for the next STL full stack. So thanks again, and everybody stay safe and happy out there.